Hey Dan, there's been some really disturbing developments in the ACT, and I'm not sure whether listeners realise just how significant these developments are, but there's some things that have been happening around the Calvary Hospital, where the ACT government is mandatorily acquiring Canberra's Calvary Hospital. Give us some insight here into just how significant this issue is.
Well, Neil, I think, you and I and your listeners, we probably thought we've seen everything. But what we've seen here is the Greens and Labor government here in the ACT targeting the takeover of Calvary Hospital, which is, the only Catholic hospital here in the ACT. There's Canberra Hospital, there's the government hospitals, and for since about 1979 there has existed Calvary Hospital, which is run by the little company of Mary Healthcare. Now, the little company of Mary, they don't provide elective abortions, and they'll have no part of euthanasia when that is, inevitably passed here in the next few months. So for some 6 months or so, we understand there's been a group of about 50 public servants working away on how to, seize this hospital. And so on about the 10th of May, without any prior warning, they advised that they're going to compulsorily acquire this hospital. And on the next day, the very next day, there was legislation in the ACT Assembly to do exactly that. And this is intended to be voted on the 31st of May. And Neil, the Greens and Labor have the numbers here, and essentially they can do whatever they like. But we'll make sure that they hear from us on the way through, and that this matter, won't be forgotten at the election. There's a very serious ideological seizure of a Catholic hospital. We've not seen the likes of this anywhere in Australia before.
Just to pause here, Dan, because talking about the seriousness of this and talking about the way Australia has been for its whole history, this opportunity that the church has had to expand, to build those sorts of service facilities like hospitals and schools and aged care and any number of other community welfare facilities. When you've got government forced acquisition like this, doesn't that mean that all of the assets that have been built over all of this time then become in some ways vulnerable? Is that drawing too long a bow?
Well, compulsory acquisition can happen by a government, and as long as it happens on just terms, we remember the Castle case. If they've got to build an airport or there's some compelling reason to take out some houses, a government will have to provide just terms. So there are no just terms here agreed with Calvary. They may have to, the government will have to cough up some dollars at some point, but they're clearly moving in on an ideological basis. We know this, Neil, because there was a report that was tabled a month ago in April saying that Calvary Hospital, has too much religious overtones and that the government must act. In fact, a quote from the report that was provided to the government, the medical services offered by Calvary have too much of a religious overtone. And we know that what the government is trying to do here in the ACT is to make abortion after 16 weeks gestation available at all hospitals, and that would be resisted by Calvary. So the idea that they can take over land for an airport on just terms, we learned that from the Castle, that's understandable, but the idea of taking over a hospital because it won't perform abortions or euthanasia is absolutely unheard of. And, of course, they're couching this in terms of infrastructure, et cetera, but they cannot hide from the report that came out only a few weeks earlier saying that Calvary had too much of a religious overtone. And, we've got to get a bit of outrage here, Neil. We've got a town hall meeting tonight here in Canberra, which will happen at the Catholic Cathedral in the hall. Adjacent to that, Father Tony Percy who's the head of the task force that's pushing back on this, will speak. Wendy Francis will, John Steinoff from the Human Rights Law Alliance, and we're expecting a full hall there as we talk to people about writing to and bombarding their local ACT Assembly members. They might do this, but they'll be certainly hearing from us on the way through.
Is this a freedom of religion issue too, Dan? Because we might say, thank God for the Catholic Church, who do have such a strong stance on pro-life issues, that they won't provide abortions, that they won't support euthanasia. And so when you've got a government coming in and in a heavy-handed way, forcibly acquiring their assets, is this a freedom of religion thing? Shouldn't church-run institutions be able to actually make a moral stand on these things?
I absolutely agree with you, Neil. The idea that, religion is just expressed in church on Sunday hasn't been the Western or the Australian experience, or in any country, to be honest. The idea that, hospitals have been started from this Christian sense of devotion and goodwill. You've got the nuns who have, run this hospital. It's a non-for-profit. They're not in it for money. But it's the outworking of their Christian faith. And so what's offensive to the Greens Labor government is seeing that ethos being expressed. But people love Calvary Hospital. People love the presence of the nuns, the pastoral side of it. It's a well-run hospital. And one 97-year-old patient of the hospital said that the Calvary should in fact be taking over the Canberra Hospital, which is not so well run, and there have been scathing reports about that. So what often happens here, Neil, is people don't put up a fight. If this happens, then what would the Daniel Andrews government do with a school that won't toe the line on gender? Would there be, could there be takeovers of Christian schools once this mould is broken? If this goes through without a whimper, so to speak, then we have a new frontier in the battle, government versus church.
As you say, Dan Flynn, there needs to be, in this instance, an appropriate level of outrage. That's the word you used a little earlier. And I imagine that this is not just something that people in churches need to be outraged about. I mean, if they're coming for the assets of the church, what's to stop them coming for your assets too? Is that where things ultimately lead under a government that seizes what it wants?
Well, absolutely. That's a sort of a Soviet-style seizure. In the Soviet Union, they could take whatever they want, including your family home, if they wanted to, or dispossess you if you have different political views. So, that'd be down the spectrum. We're probably further down the spectrum than we would want to be when we see this type of move. I think, Neil, we have a campaign that's up at the moment where people are writing to their MPs. Father Percy has an independent petition. I think he has 18,000 signatures on that. We are certainly seeing the Catholic leadership in Canberra here, rising to its feet, finding their voice, and being very mobilised on this. And so, it is great to see cross-denominational support and unity, which we'll be seeing tonight at this meeting at the hall at St Christopher's Cathedral.
Okay, so St Christopher's Cathedral in Canberra, that's where the meeting is on tonight. And as you say, Dan, there's a writing campaign. And for listeners,
yes.
No doubt listeners everywhere can express their outrage here because this does affect, if the dominoes start to fall, it could happen anywhere. A writing campaign, the ACL website, acl.org.au.